So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our newest part of our Children's Literature Association conversation series. And this one is featuring three amazing translators who are going to share kind of about the process. And I got I hope that they share something really special with us that nobody else knows yet. Maybe something they're working on or something that, is breaking news for them. So I am Hiawatha Smith. I am one of the members of the communications committee. I'm also joined by a fellow committee member, Rachel, who is also featured on your screen.
Hello,
And
everybody. Thanks for joining us.
and so we will be facilitating today. We're just on the screen for now. Once we turn it kind of over to them, we'll unmute ourselves and ask questions, but we'll leave our panelists as our featured parts of our screen. So, first thing is we'll start with a brief introduction of our participants. So, we will let you share kind of who you are, where you're from, languages you work with, and maybe one exciting thing about your work. And so we can start with Adam and then Kit and then Karen, because that's how you are on my screen.
Sure. My name is Adam Levy. I'm the publisher of Transit Books and Transit Children's Editions. I also am a translator from Hungarian. Um, what were other things where I'm from? I'm from New York. I currently live in the San Francisco Bay Area, where our publishing house is located. I started out translating literature for adults, but in the last couple of years, I've started getting more interested in translating literature for children. That's kind of dovetailed with the emergence of our own series of books that we're now publishing for kids, and it's just been so much fun to do. It works the same kind of muscles, but in a different direction. Um, and yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you. Kit.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. This is this is so much fun. Um, my name's Kit Maud. I live in Argentina, which is where I'm zooming from today. I'm a translator from the Spanish. Pretty much, I'm in the realm of children's books, pretty much exclusively for tapioca books. And it's been. I was trying to remember, how you came across me, and I honestly have no idea. But it's a journey that began a few years ago, and it's one I've enjoyed enormously, especially seeing as it coincided pretty much with my siblings having children, and seeing how much they enjoyed the books that you've been publishing. It's been a real thrill, and something exciting about my work. All of my work is exciting, but uh, it's something that I enjoy. Uh, there's the exciting part is that you never quite know what's going to come up next, especially in the world of children's literature. So that's what keeps me excited for at least.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, Karen.
Hello, nice to be here today to meet you. My name is Karen Snelson, and I'm a freelance children's book editor and translator. And I've lived in Seattle since 1988, which is why I'm wearing fleece. Um, I translate French books into English, and one exciting new project that's coming out in October 2025 is, I don't know if you can see this. It's called The Great Big Book of Museums
Wow.
and it's by French author Eva Bensar and French artist Benjamin Shaw. I'm a really big fan of his. It's very charming. And that's, I think I said that's with Red Comet Press. But anyway, it's 10 by 14, so it's enormous.
Wow, that's quite big for a book.
Yeah.
All right, so we will go ahead and jump in and pose some questions to you all. To attendees, please feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the chat, and Rachel and I will monitor those, and we'll try to look through to imbue some of those in our questions as well. So the first question, we'll start out kind of light with, how did you get into this role of being a translator for books? And so that's kind of for all of you.
Shall we go back to the front this time?
Sure.
So that's me. Okay. Like everyone here today, I'm sure I love words. I love language, always have. Translation is like catnip to me. It's very fun. I came to translation pretty late in my career. I started working in children's book publishing in the 80s, and I've been an editor, an author, a bookseller, a children's book reviewer for Amazon, Shelf Awareness, Kirkus, Booklist. And after a few decades, I wanted to try something new. And the call of the wild was translation. Fortunately, I'd been going to conferences like the American Library Association for about 28 years, wearing different hats as a reviewer and a member of some children's book awards committees. And so I had the opportunity to forge some real relationships with publishers who were passionate about world literature. And I got really lucky. My first co-translation was with Claudia Bedrick at Enchanted Lion, Jerome by Heart. And it's just a lovely book. And that year it won an honor for the publisher, a Batchelder honor. So I also met Angus from Red Comet at these conferences over the decades. So that's really how that started. And I guess the moral of the story is hooray for conferences and human to human contact. So is that your dog, Kit? Is that?
It is not our dog. It thinks it's our dog, and it hangs out in our garden, but it's very much not our dog. Apologies. In fact, it's running over to the neighbor's house right now, having heard them come home. So it's a sort of neighborhood dog.
Okay.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I sort of fell into. I studied American Studies in the UK, which involved my spending a year in Argentina in 2003, and I fell in love in many different ways. But one of the things I fell in love with was the literature of Argentina and Latin America in general. When I graduated, I looked into a job at an independent publisher in London that specialised in translated fiction, translations in general, called Peter Owen. And then I moved on to another small publisher called Marion Boyers, who had been around since the 60s, publishing people who no one else ever did. But because their minds were open to books from all over the world, they ended up accumulating some extraordinary lists. And so I learned about translation from sort of that way, and eventually having worked my way through various different jobs. I mean, as a small publisher, Adam will know this rather better than anyone. You do a lot of different things at the same time, so you get to know the whole thing. And I realized how much I enjoyed working on editing translations, and I thought that given my familiarity with Spanish, it would be something I could try. And when I moved out to Argentina, I sort of set up shop here, and I was lucky enough to be able to make a living for myself out of it.
That's really great. I think I fell into translation, or kind of drifted toward translation. After college, I moved to Budapest and got a job teaching there and taught there for a few years. And I didn't speak Hungarian before that, and kind of started getting into the language. and moving more toward literary circles as time went on. And I ultimately went back to New York for graduate school and started um, kind of stopping by the door of this really wonderful and generous Hungarian translator named Ivan Sanders, um, who was a professor there at the time. And I had just kind of in my free time started just like taking a stab at great Hungarian literature that didn't have a publisher, that had never been published in English. And I wasn't really thinking about it in any kind of professionalized sense. I didn't really know what the process was. I had no kind of ambition. It was just like, this is a great thing. Why wouldn't it be nice if other people could read this in English the way that I'm feeling this in this other language? And I would kind of pester him and have him look at my translations and give me some notes. And that was kind of the beginning for me as I then kind of started going, as Karen said, to conferences and things and started kind of conceiving of the apparatus beyond that, like that very individual and personal relationship that you have with the text that you love. And then, started doing more translation stuff seriously, and then started a publishing house. So kind of my translation has lived alongside and sometimes behind and in the distance quietly um, behind my other publishing work. And now when I do find certain pockets in a day or a month or whatever it might be to get back to it, it's a fun return home in that way.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, so I am thrilled that we have like three different languages represented here, as well as like different locations of where everybody is in the world. Um, Hungarian, I know from having gone to Budapest last year, is not the easiest language in the world to learn. So I'm really impressed um, with your Hungarian skills. So you all kind of touched on this maybe a little bit, but like, do you have specific experiences that you feel like prepared you or qualified you for becoming a translator?
I feel like the experiences are not the ones that you would think within that language that you're translating out of and are more within the language that you're translating into. Um, so at that time when I was in graduate school, kind of doing translation stuff secretly, I was also at that time, had big dreams for myself as a writer, and I've always been a book person and a literature person, but I was also kind of fancying myself a writer and writing criticism, writing a lot of other kind of stuff at that time. And so the translation kind of it felt very much like a natural extension of all of those kinds of uh, attention to reading in that way. So whether you're reading as a critic or whether you're reading as a writer or just as a person who feels deeply about literature, I would say those things prepared me best to think about translation and the questions of translation. And then, you kind of take the stuff for granted, um, the proficiency in the language that you're translating out of. Um, a little bit, but obviously maybe people have other um, feelings about it depending on what kind of journey you took to translation.
I
No, I
I
think that's. Oh, sorry. There you go.
go ahead. Oh, well, I agree that it's definitely more my English skills than my French skills that I bring to the table. I do speak French. I studied French for years and have visited there. But I think ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with wordplay. We had a lot of book slang around that I didn't understand, but um, that I've just always loved. And I think ultimately my experience as a writer and editor and a reader of thousands of children's books over the years, that seems more relevant to what I bring. And I'm still learning, of course, and that's at least half the fun of translation, that you're always learning.
Yeah, I would just echo what you two have said. It's, I mean, the only thing that I mean, the best work you can do to prepare yourself for translation is to read, and that's in both languages and a lot, and to think. And if you find yourself reading something in the original language and thinking, "Oh, how would this sound in English?" then that's a wonderful exercise to do. And if you're doing that all the time, then that's wonderful preparation for when you actually sit down and start doing that. But I mean, it's always the target language, the that you have to really always keep working on and keep thinking about how this person wrote this and this person wrote that, and what words work here and there, and especially for children's books when you have so few words to deal with often, getting exactly the right one is there. So it's just reading and reading and reading, and then trying to remember things you read and things that worked in certain situations, um, and um, and hopefully that comes back to you in the moment when you're actually working on the text.
All right. Thank you. So very interesting because I never thought about it that way, that you really do have to focus on the English more than the other. And your quote about how would this sound in English, like that you think about that piece. So let's go a little deeper. So my next question was actually posed from one of my students who was in the conversation today, because I was like, hey, we're doing this session and she's doing some work in the Spanish immersion classroom. And I was like, what question would you ask? So her question was, how do you address native language, specifically slang, in your works? Like, do you translate it too, or do you kind of avoid it? How do you address that? And whoever wants to start first can start this time.
I know.
Who's gonna be? Who's gonna be?
You call out.
I'll go first because no, it's one of the most difficult questions that always comes up, because there's no slang and very place specific language. You're always committing some kind of betrayal, trying to render that, taking this out of context and putting it in a different context. You can't. There's no getting away from that. Um, uh, it's less of an issue for children's books, but not always. Sometimes you come across something that's just so culturally specific, that you want to convey. But I mean, in an ideal world, I'd always run away from it, but you can't do that. So you go, if some you think really hard and think what works, what might work well in a certain situation. You don't want to. You want to avoid. I would always lean more towards being neutral than being anachronistic. Anything that takes a reader out of the story, out of the reading, wondering, well, where did that come from? Has the translator decided to do this? Is what you want to avoid at all costs. But you also want to be respectful of the original voice too. So yeah, I have no good answer for you. So I really shouldn't have gone first.
I mean, I think about this a lot as an editor, not just as a translator. I mean, I think about this all the time as an editor, especially on the adult side. I mean, I think if there was some kind of theoretical approach, I'm often very much in favor, not as Kit suggested, of making things like stand out awkwardly, but definitely thinking about the opportunity that translation presents to grow English and to think about what kind of things that English can hold and not think of the things that it can't hold because this particular slang doesn't have a direct analog. I mean, very often the kind of things that you think might be challenging to make work in another language are actually the easy things to make work in another language, like slang often, because a lot of slang is actually, I mean, we have a lot of slang. Other languages have a lot of slang. They kind of work similarly most of the time. And it tends to be other kinds of things that require more like how are we going to treat this kind of thing that might not have a very easy, the same kind of cultural referent um, in this context that we're publishing into? Are we going to provide a kind of stealth gloss on something to make it more intelligible on the page? You especially think about that too in children's books and illustrations. So not just in the text, but we made the decision across several books, but in one in particular, there was some signage um, that was um, in a Korean script, and the point in showing the signage was the depiction of the way that the language was the way that the lettering was even or the alphabet was construed over time, and we wanted to show that change and didn't think that by putting it in English we would be able to create that same effect. So we actually kept it in the Korean to be able to show the change of the language over time. This might be the kind of thing that 0 2-year-olds care about, but it was the kind of thing that was important to us in terms of the way that we were carrying this book across from one language to another. And I think actually that kind of exposure to, even if it's from an original that then is not, you know, that particular aspect isn't something that little kids are picking up. It's something that's important for the people who are reading the books to them. And so we're kind of thinking about it on a few different levels.
I guess in translating slang, I mean, slang means a few things too, right? I mean, there's some it can be figurative language or, insults. I try to capture the same meaning of the slang, but just assess sort of its level of its spirit or its humor, or maybe its level of informality, or even its level of vulgarity of the source language. But like this book, wait, where is it? This is a book I translated for Enchanted Lion too. It's by
Oh,
Black's Book.
nice. I
It's
didn't
kind of
realize you translated
comic
that.
book, graphic novel. Do
Yeah.
you,
Yeah, I know
uh,
that book.
it's just an explosion of rather innocent insults. It's just like I wrote a couple down. You buffoon. I used for espèce de gros malpoli, which is you species of massive impoliteness. Just sort of if you literally translated it. Or you lazy oafs was des paresseux mal élevés, which is like you lazy, badly brought up people. You annoying old geezer, quel vieux casse-pied, what an old broken foot. You could never literally translate any of these things, but just trying to keep in the spirit of these are a little old-fashioned, even in the French. So we're kind of keeping that old-fashioned feeling. So it's I love this type of challenge. It's fun. But
Oh, I would add, I would, if at all possible, and it doesn't work for children's books at all, but yeah, I like to leave the original word if I can, and see if I can't introduce that into common parlance. It doesn't often work, but you never know.
yeah, makes sense.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. Everybody obviously got to meet Stephen, my cat. So apologies for him trucking through the screen there. He's very cute. Now I'm trying to distract him with a laser pointer so he spends less time with his tail on top of my head. So this is kind of a related follow-up question, but like, what role do you think cultural context plays in the translations that you do? It's sort of a very big question, I suppose, um, but yeah, specifically, how about that? When you were writing this question, were you thinking sort of like cultural context in terms of like what's happening in the world at a given moment, or were you thinking more like, is it difficult to translate like sort of what like what's polite, say, in Spanish versus what's polite versus,
I
you know,
think a
in,
combination,
okay.
as well as also how some stories, and I'm trying to think of one that one of you all may have worked with, but some stories come out of like small cultural communities. And like that context may really play into the original text, but how do you like keep that context when sometimes it's hard to keep it because you have to really understand that culture to get that, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think in the same way, if you think about it in even within English, I mean, I don't think of English as a monolith in that way, even or books written and published in the US, all in the same term. And so there's a way in which there are so many books that are written in English that you would have the same kind of issue with, that you are written from a particular community point of view, whatever it might be, that might like that might not be as intelligible as you might think across a different cultural context within the same language. And so I don't necessarily presume that that kind of um, intelligibility can carry over, even though you might do all the kind of like glosses that I was mentioning before to try to situate someone within that cultural context as well as you can. But I think it's okay if it requires someone to do a little more legwork to think about um, to understand that world that that book is coming out of a little better, and that it might not have the same meaning for, an American reader as it does for someone else. I was also thinking about this in the context just of language too, and I was thinking about this book that I had translated from Hungarian, which is this book of kind of really whimsical little kind of bedtime stories that um, put you into places of paradox and play. There's a story where everything is possible, where everything exists all at once, another where nothing exists at all. But there was one that really gave me some challenges, which is um, it's called The Story, or I translate it as The Story That Wasn't There. And really what it plays on, and I've found my Hungarian edition, is that it begins with, in Hungarian, the expression for once upon a time, which is once there was, where there wasn't, there once was. And, every language and culture has their own kind of formulation for once upon a time, and they all kind of they like when you think about once upon a time, it's kind of crazy to think about this as actually a way to lead into, but it's a cue, like it cues you into this fanciful story uh, that you're about to hear. But because in Hungarian it goes, once there was where there wasn't, there was a where there wasn't. And so it makes concrete and literalizes the place of uh, where there wasn't. So essentially, I had to try to think of a way to recreate this, how you could make like once upon a time into a concrete place where there wasn't. And so this is something that is immediately funny to Hungarians reading it because you recognize this phrasing. It inverts it subverts it in a way that like you're expecting something playful to follow. Because then the story that it tells is basically a search for once upon a time. And I tried to come up with something that would work in the same kind of way in English, as opposed to trying to use the Hungarian formulation, because that Hungarian formulation is meaningless to an English reader in that kind of context. So I feel like so much of the work in translation, when we're talking about something that has a real cultural specificity. It's not just kind of like the social, historical, political context, but also the linguistic context too, which especially in kids' books is such a site for humor and play and Because that's the kind of stuff that kids really take so much pleasure in. Sorry, such a long rambling answer across so many different directions.
Adam, it's so funny because this magician's book, Blex Bolex, plays around with time also with Once Upon a Time. In French, it's Il est une fois encore. So, but really it's
Yeah.
il était, like that's present tense. And so we were just going crazy trying to figure out how to place that in English. But it's so
What did you
that
do?
did Once Upon a Time That Is Now.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So anyway, but it's so funny we were wrangling with the same kind of beast. But yeah, the other aspect of this conversation is the well, like in 2023 that whole Roald Dahl blow up about censoring his classic 1960s novels to make them more acceptable to like rewriting passages that relate to weight or gender or mental health or race. Do you know that whole anyway, when I went to Bologna in March of 2023, and that had just happened in February. So that was people were talking about that issue a lot. And AI was something that they talked about a lot too, even back then. But
Old
that
racist authors and AI. It's a great panel.
no, it's just that you know it's just sort of some things that come up in my translation work is that going to fly here? Is that with American audiences being more sensitive to insensitivity? You know what I'm saying? Or yeah,
Yeah, I pass on a lot of books for that reason.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it is an aspect, I think, of translation and comes up a lot.
Very, very much so. It's yeah. I mean, it's something you're always having to think hard about. But there's always some kind of solution. I mean, the point about cultural specificity is the reason we're translating books and publishing them into English is because we want to share these stories, these cultures, with a wider, in our case, with an English-speaking audience. So you have to work to preserve as much as possible the distinctiveness there in a way that that is easily intelligible in terms when it comes to children's books, immediately intelligible. I remember I had a terrifying conversation with a professor in the US about this. We were talking about books for adults, but I was saying that I would prefer a reader to take a little bit of time and think and maybe look something up than put a footnote or than to take them out of the story. And she said, no, my students just wouldn't do that. And that was scary to hear. I don't know how true that is, whether she just has a particularly lazy class or not. But that idea is also sort of now has stuck in my head a bit too. But especially for children, but you want them to have fun at all times with and to be moved and all those things. So yeah, no, it's a tightrope. With me, we did with Tapioca. We did a book called The Neighborhood, which it's about an old lady in a Spanish neighborhood. I want to say it's Madrid, but now I'm not sure. I wish I had the book with me to show because it's a wonderfully illustrated and told little story about an old lady wandering around her neighborhood, essentially. But that couldn't be more Spanish or more contemporary Spanish either. There's no it avoids cliche in a wonderful way. But no, I mean there you want to. The idea was to keep it living and breathing in the neighborhood as far as possible. And so that, I mean, you would set the gauge to more cultural, to more Spanish than English speaking. So I guess, I mean, and it also depends very much on the book in question and and the author in question in these cases too.
All right, so thank you. Because I just was randomly wondering about it. I think you all kind of tackled it from different perspectives as well, and it gave us a real good just understanding of it, especially for those of us that do research in this area to think about like, hey, it's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So I'm going to pose a question that's not on our list that I just randomly thought about, and I'm like, I'm going to throw this out there. So we're talking about your translations from other languages into English, but do you do translations from English into other languages? Okay, everybody should hear no. So,
You shouldn't. You really shouldn't. If it's not your first language, it's all. I mean, I've seen it done. I've seen it done well, but
But I would say, yeah, or if it's not a language that you write so in the same way that, if we're writing, if we think of ourselves as capable writers in another language, then that's I would think is fine to translate into. Um, I don't write in Hungarian, sadly, just English.
I do a little writing in Spanish. But I think one of the reasons I think one of the reasons people ask me to write reviews, because that's what I mostly write is reviews in Spanish, is because I sound so gosh darn English in what I do, that they find it kind of quaint. But yeah, it's language is such an deeply embedded thing. I mean, there are a lot of people who have several different first languages, and I envy them greatly.
So I wanted to kind of follow up on something that Adam said a minute ago when you said like you pass on quite a few books. And so how are the books that you translate determined? Uh,
Um, well, I mean, there's a different consideration. I feel like as like a publishing house, how we're thinking about it. But I mean, me personally, for this kids book that I was mentioning, um, I found it in Bologna actually. I usually just like kind of lurk at the Hungarian stand, and um, I found it there and thought it was so unusual and unlike a lot of other kids books that I had been seeing, and then I kind of thought of it as an interesting challenge because it is so playful and really is rooted so deeply in its paradoxes of language that I wondered how it would sound in English. And so I translated it for a couple of them and read them to my son. I don't remember how old he was at the time, maybe two, three, two, and it was kind of like a test to see whether he thought they were interested, like whether he thought they were funny or whether I just thought they were funny. And he was really into it and thought they were funny. So I was like, okay, maybe like translate a couple more. And then after a certain point, I was like, I've translated this whole book. We should just publish it. And so I think that's an unusual thing because um, most translators don't also run their own publishing house. But so I think I'm probably an exceptional case here.
You did a great job. I love that. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
and from the author side, like, do you all kind of have a decision in the process, or do you just kind of do what they ask of you?
That's how it's worked for me. I've just accepted assignments after they've chosen the books.
With children's books, the same here. I mean, I've only really worked with tapioca, so sorry, the cats think it's time for their dinner, so you may hear them a little bit. Yeah, no, I get sent books, and that's always fun. It's like a little gift in your email. This new book to be done. For adult books, you do a bit more pitching. Generally unsuccessful, but sometimes a book will get through, and that's great. Sorry. There we are.
All right. So again, attendees, if you have any questions for the participants, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We will graciously ask those. So we've covered a lot of different things here, and we've kind of talked about developmental ranges you all work with. So what do you think is, or what would you say is the most challenging part of this process? And I think Adam, you can talk about it from like both sides of the spectrum, but then like Karen and Kit, how do you see like what's challenging for you as the translators?
I think one of the most challenging things is that idioms. I mean, it's also figurative language. It's the most fun thing, but it's the most challenging. So just like you'll come across something that translates as you do not have air in your plate or something that, it sounds like, or you don't have the air of being in your plate. And then you have to sort of, if you're not familiar with that expression, then you just start digging. And, but that one ended up as, I'll just go straight to, you look a little green in the gills. Just you don't look well, you don't. And there's a long thing about how plate, it's not plate, it's more like a saddle, and it went back to the 16th century. And anyway, that kind of detective work is really fun, but challenging in a good way. I mean, I'd love to hear from the others about that. That also.
Kid, I don't know what you were thinking about saying. Um, I don't find it so much challenging about it. I mean, I think so these are like really interesting problems that like part of our like theoretical and aesthetic obligation is to come up with fun and interesting solutions to. So I don't really see too much I mean, things are hard, but I don't think that I think it's a really fun process that we can like rely on the input of a lot of different people from, translators themselves to the authors sometimes, but not really, and to the editors, to everyone who's involved in kind of putting a book together and thinking about how we want it to live in the world. I personally see more of the challenges on the publishing side, where we're trying to think about how to introduce an author who to an English language audience and into an American book market that for us we're often trying to convince people of the value of reading beyond our borders and finding exciting literature that breaks with certain expectations or conventions that they might be more used to seeing, which sometimes also can be like a commercial house and a small house kind of um, divide, and not just an American versus an international divide, because there are plenty of commercial kids books being published on the commercial side internationally. So, I mean, I think for us, trying to find a way of bringing these books out and championing them in a way that gets them in front of readers who find the same kind of excitement and joy in these books that don't underestimate the kids reading them or who they're uh, or the people who are reading them to them. Had a lot of thems in there. Um, yeah, that's probably the thing that we think most about.
No, I mean the the challenging part. That I mean that really is the fun part. Coming when you're actually just working through and you're thinking about 15 different ways to say the chicken crossed the road, and eventually choosing one. The thing that 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 terrifies me is all the different people to whom you own a responsibility in your work. You have the author, the publisher, and the readers, um, and all their respective cultures and histories behind there. And the firstly, the knowledge that nothing you're never ever going to get it right. There is no right. There is no perfect right solution. So you're another way of putting that is that you're inevitably going to fail in everything you do. And then secondly, and if that's the case, then you worry that you the worry that whether you failed enough or well enough, and you haven't where you haven't let people down too much. I mean, that's the thing that always haunts me at least. Uh, but on the other hand, it's the process itself is so much fun, and if that's the price you have to pay for coming to the end of it, then so be it.
I'm gonna throw in a question from the chat. Dahlia, I don't know if the questions about Arabic translation are as much in our guest's wheelhouse, but the final question that you pose here, how can we effectively navigate the complexities of regional dialects when translating children's stories? Is that something that you face in your work as dealing with kind of regionality, and is there a way that you approach that?
So is the question about regions within the language that you're translating from, or just regional dialects in general?
I would say regional dialects that you're translating from, although it's not my question, so
Yeah.
maybe if you can clarify in the chat, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
It's yeah, it's tough. I mean, because again, you want to reflect if a voice is specifically regional and has a specific dialect that is not often, especially if it's a marginalized dialect or an uncommon one, you want to be able to convey that. But again, it's the same. You're coming to similar worries about slang and things. I've seen some very poor solutions to that kind of thing where people try to substitute one regional dialect in English, and there are a lot of them. Goodness me, for one from Spain or elsewhere, and I don't think that ever works. Um, Sometimes you have to sort of make something up a little bit yourself. Try to make the voice sound different from say the hegemonic voice without without going too far. But yeah, again, it's not. There's no good. There are good solutions, but there's no perfect one.
Yeah, and sorry, I think my question was more about whether you meant like different dialects within Spanish, like Argentinian Spanish versus Mexican Spanish, as opposed to like um, the dialect. Well, I guess it depends on how we're thinking about a dialect. But yes, as Kit says, I find it really somewhat grating when you read a regional dialect that is then uh, made into like Southern American English, and or and it always just kind of it never feels it never sits um, totally right with me. Oh, but I was going to say something else. Ooh, what was I going to say? something so good. No, I can't remember the exact thing. Uh, no, I can't remember. Sorry.
All right, so I want to jump into Timothy's question here. And his question basically gave a little preface here that some of the award money is split with the translators now, and translators' names are now being seen on the covers of books. But what other areas could the industry improve this space for translators? And then he put royalties as well, maybe as an option. So, kind of, what do you all think about that?
I mean, we pay royalties. We pay advances against royalties for our translations. And more or less think about translations um, and translator visibility and translation advocacy on on our children's list the same way that we do on our adult list. And I realize I'm speaking for, I mean, as a publisher right now, and not as much as a translator.
That's okay.
But yeah, I don't know if other translators or if the other translators here want to have other ideas for how they they think about it. But yes, we do pay advances against royalties, and I think it would be kind of uh, well, I'll just say that.
There you go.
Oh, no, I don't really have much to say on this topic. Um, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's the first thing to say is, I mean, it's very gratifying that people are taking more interest in translation. They really are, and they want to know who a translator is of a book, because it's a very important part of it's obviously it's a fundamental part of of any work in translation, but it's also worth bearing in mind that it's the book industry is not an easy one to make a living out of. It's a very flooded market, and so I often think, perhaps because I came to translation from the point of view of the publisher, and I saw I've seen the accounts and the sales figures a lot of the time for a lot of really wonderful works that we were proud to work on, but that didn't do well. This is a long time. This is a long time ago. Sometimes I think we can cut publishers something of a break for just giving us the chance to work on these wonderful books. I mean, having said that, royalties, they're nice when they work and when it makes sense, but it's not a deal breaker for me in any sense. It's such a privilege to work on this stuff sometimes that I find myself doing what I can to make it work in a way that works for all the parties.
Kit is giving a very diplomatic answer, but I do think that it's important that we take seriously the material working conditions of translators into serious consideration when thinking about the publication of any book. But at the same time, I'm seeing some other comments in the chat. Also, I do think on the publishing side, it's if we're talking about, improving the material conditions for translators, but also I think part of the thing too is making translators' work more visible, not just putting the names on the cover. To me, that's like base level stuff. But providing forums where translators can be in conversation about their work, doing book events where people are talking about these particularities of translation to make this work more visible. So we're not just kind of eliding the fact that these are books that were originally written in a different cultural context, and in a different language, but actually can celebrate the fact that they came from other places and that they have taken a journey to be rewritten essentially in another language, and that the translator plays a really important and central role in that process, in as much on the kids side as on the adult side. So thank you to Hiawatha for putting this together. I feel like it's really, I think, is a great example of working toward that end.
And maybe just one more really quick question, and I apologize. I have turned on the cat toy known as the Red Menace, and you can probably hear it in the background. Um, so I think the last question that I have is just like, what do you have on the horizon that you're working on that you're excited about right now? What can we anticipate finding on the bookshelves?
I'm going to see if I can put. I've got a couple of Tapioca's newest books. One. There you go. Hey, that worked. This is really fun, this one. And one more. I think it must be. No, is that? Yeah, there we go. Those are two of Tapioca's upcoming releases, and they're both a lot of fun. The Lighthouse Keeper, I mean, you'd have to have a whole panel for the process it's going through. Went through a lot of incarnations of translation, and I think it's still going through a couple. But it's going to be a wonderful book.
Did you put
Kit,
that
were
in the
you
chat?
sharing your screen?
I don't
Oh,
see.
there you go. There you go.
Oh, okay. It's going. Okay.
Are they going up? They're doing the circly thing.
Okay.
But,
Yes, they're probably just taking a second then. Um,
Oh, that looks so good.
Maybe they're too big. Oh, if they go up, they go up. Sorry, I just jumped in there because I had that all keyed up, ready to go.
Yep, I'm getting them now, so great. Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, and Karen or Adam, did you have any?
Oh, sure. Or Karen, you say yours.
Oh, since I already talked about the Great Big Book of Museums coming in October, I'll go retroactive too. This is still one of my favorites. It's a great gift book for book lovers, and the author Timothée de Fombelle followed children around, recording their different positions that they were reading in, and then gave the poses names like yoga poses. So anyway, like if you read in the bathtub and drop your books in the bathwater, you might be the water lily, or I think I might be the burrower, or maybe the fortress. The sleepwalker. The sleepwalker is so engrossed in his book he falls into a manhole, open manhole cover. So anyway, I'll just still love this one. So it's with Red Comet Press.
That's so great. This is not a book that I translated, but it's one that we're publishing that's coming out in May, I believe. It's called A Shimpa. It's translated from the Portuguese by Juliana Barbosa, and it's by Catarina Sobral. But it's about this a made-up word that a linguist discovers, and then the word ends up creating chaos and confusion as people try to figure out what the word means. And this was actually a very fun one to work through the translation of. And actually, when it was the original Portuguese was a shimpa, but with a C. I mean, sorry, with a CH. And we came up with so many different other words that could have the same function. Yeah, that had the same function, that had the same feel as a shimpa in Portuguese. but in English. And we tried it out in so many different parts of speech, but then ended up coming back to, in the end, essentially what the Portuguese is, but spelling it Englishly. It's a really fun book.
Definitely some interesting things there. So again, thank you to our presenters as well as our attendees. Attendees, we invite you to continue engaging with us and the presenters via social media channels. Feel free to follow them, search, appropriately stalk them on the internet so that you can see their latest works. If you don't follow authors and publishers online, you're missing out because they do share some interesting things. Also want to give a special thank you to Publisher Spotlight, who helped us to secure these amazing translators and to help put this session on. So thank you to our Publisher Spotlight friends. So that is it for us for today. Attendees, I'm going to ask you to stay